So thank you everyone for coming, and welcome to the Kid in Her series, where we explore childhood curiosity, values, and resilience, those that shape extraordinary women around us today, much like my guest, Dr. Sarat Kardar. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dina Jeha, and I founded the Kid in Her network earlier this year to really provide a platform for remarkable women's stories, female founders, inspirational women in various industries, to create a community and a network around them that hopefully they benefit from, and also that brings something to everyone here in the audience as well. So our guest today is a scholar, a global citizen, a board leader, a mentor, an entrepreneur, and a mother.
So boring.
Which part?
All of it. So square.
She's lived across worlds, invested deeply in education, championed women, and is now challenging all of this into her new venture in slow fashion and community-driven design. So Sarat, thank you for joining us today. We're going to touch on the concept of identity, education, the shift in the gender narrative, and of course, the Sarat Kardar brand and all the beautiful things that you see around you here. But much like everything we do at the Kid in Her, we always start with the childhood. And so if I can kick off by asking you about that part of your life. So you've grown up between two worlds.
Yeah. So, well, firstly, thank you so much for taking this beautiful room, inviting, such wonderful guests, and taking the time and faith to invite me so that I don't embarrass you at the end of this and you can be like, oh, that was a disaster. But really, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for taking the time out of your days to come and listen to whatever I have to say. I am of Iraqi origin. I was born in New York. My father's family are Turkmen, so originally Turkish, but Iraqi. And my parents left Iraq in the late 60s. So I was born in New York, and shortly thereafter we moved to the Gulf, Abu Dhabi, where there was nothing. And then Bahrain, which is a small island in the Gulf at the time. I spent a few years there, and then in 1980, I was 5, we moved to London. And not knowing where we were supposed to go, we ended up staying in London and living in London right through our life. So I was educated in England. I was at ASL at 5 years old. I stayed there until I was 13. Then I went to a girls' school in London, at St. Paul's, and then I went on to university. So life was the kid in me. I played a lot with Barbies. I have an older sister, 7 years older, who kind of did her own thing, and so I sort of grew up quite alone, in the sense that I didn't have a zillion siblings around me. My parents were very busy. They gave me a beautiful life, and I was very privileged, but time was not something I got a lot of. And I think in this generation, we're seeing a huge pendulum shift in how we all parent, whether it's us or your husbands or your partners. There's far more of a need to be there, to pick up, to drop off, to go to things, to be attentive in a way that didn't happen. I mean, there were parent-teacher conferences. My mom would show up. I don't think my dad ever went to one. There was, art day where you put all your art on the wall and your parents come. Not sure how many times they came to that, but that was okay. There was a hall pass, and I accepted it. And only later on did I have to rejig what was important to me when I became a mother, and it helped me become the person I am, even with the negatives. Tina Turner said, you take poison and make it medicine. And I think that's just a brilliant, when you take things that maybe you don't love and was painful, but then you turn it around to something positive, and so you're actually grateful that you had that, because you wouldn't have been able to have gotten to where you get. So these are the lessons of life. But I grew up very Western, I loved playing. I spent a lot of time talking on tapes. We had cassettes. I'm sure you are part of that generation. So I would chit chat to my tape recorder. But no, I had a great life. I mean, it was fun. I loved to dance. I loved to sing. I would dress up at night in my mom's like old kaftans and come downstairs with all her fake jewelry and eat dinner. So I loved dressing up. I watched her.
That hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed. I watched a lot of. She was very social with my dad, and they were out most nights. So I would watch her getting dressed, and I think the sense of beauty and femininity and these things were very integral to me. So there was a real female power with a masculine power.
So let's touch on your dad. You mentioned your dad. So you grew up with a very powerful figure, one that is very known to many of us that are in the finance world. He was both your strongest supporter and potentially your biggest critic, right? So maybe talk us through that.
So my dad was my North Star. He was the lighthouse in my life. He passed away in 2020. He was kind and gracious and a gentleman to the core. He taught me integrity and principles and was stoic in everything he did. He believed in education and invested in my sister and I, and basically said to us, education is what you invest in. I don't want you girls just going out and working. I want you to have an ideology, have a mission, have a purpose, wake up in the morning and contribute. His guiding principles were to be respected, to be needed, and to be trusted. And these were things that I have tried to incorporate into my life. I want to be needed. I want to be trusted. And I would take being respected over being liked any day. Very kind, very, very loving. And I think the biggest legacy he's left me is with a very clean name. And he made me understand the value of principles and reputation. And that was a really big thing. He said, your reputation is a piece of glass. You break it, it never goes back. And I think in the world that we live in today, more than ever, one's name, you can't get away with things. And you are accountable. And it was never about money. There were many people become very successful, they do very well. It comes, it goes. Beauty diminishes with years. It's just unfortunately the way it is. But investment in oneself and having a real sense of who you are and identity and culture was very important. So, but yeah, he was tough.
And it's so true in this day and age, as you say, you can't really get away from the identity that you put out there. So that respect, very important. Now he did give you exposure to some very, very interesting people. So I'm sure it would be nice to hear whether it was having Margaret Thatcher over for dinner or George Bush Sr. What was that like through a little girl's eyes?
So yes, I would get called in Oxford by his PA and say, your father's expecting you for dinner tomorrow night. It would be a seated dinner at home. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm in Oxford, I'm in college, I have friends, dinner. And then my dad would get on the phone. He's like, you're expected at dinner. We have a seated dinner for one of these. So yes, George Bush came and stayed with us in France. King Charles came with Camilla and painted a beautiful painting which ended up becoming the label of one of the Rothschild wine bottles from our home in France. Margaret Thatcher was a force. Barbara Bush, Christiane Amanpour.
All strong women.
All strong women, and he loved them. He was, he was drawn to women or men. Like there was no distinction. And so on the one hand, of course, it was like daunting and overwhelming. On the other hand, what I realized was, firstly, from his perspective, he was a banker. He wasn't in this world. The fact that they gave him time means that here was a man who had earned their respect, and he had contributed so much into think tanks and boards that he sat on, that I realized it's not about just your job. It's not just your job. It's what the investment in yourself. There's a lot of big CEOs, but there was a human element to why they became friends with him, like genuine friends. The letters I would see that they would write between one another in those days. But what also struck me was these big people were very human. And it made me realize that for as big as they are, they were just like all of us. And so it demystified a lot of that aura that we see when we watch these guys on TV. And I think from a very young age, I felt comfortable accessing people irrespective of who they might be or their public persona was. And that afforded me, I think, a lot of confidence and understanding of human beings and sort of, and openness. You know, these were, again, people who came from all sorts of religions, countries, nationalities. We grew up very open, very pluralistic in our opinions, very tolerant. And I think that was something that my parents were incredibly adamant about, bringing up global citizens. So we did not subscribe to a particular community, which had its good and its bad. But here were these people who came through our doors, you know, heads of countries in the Gulf, in the Middle East as well. It was very seamless. So it was obviously a wonderful, that was an education.
And so that's a perfect segue to education. So if we move from that global citizenship to, as you say, investing in oneself, and one of the most important things about investing in oneself is, in your opinion, investing in education. Can you discuss that belief and why education was so important to you?
Well, when you are the child of parents who have left a country, you know, immigrants, so to speak, they grow up with this vision that the West and education, what they might not have had. And yes, my mom went to Baghdad College and she got a BA, and my dad was an undergraduate in California. But when the winds changed in Iraq and there was this revolution and everything that my parents or my father's family changed overnight, he then had to get a day job cleaning and, you know, on the side. It was an upheaval of their life. Then he went back to Iraq and then brought my mother to New York in the late 60s and he did an MBA at Fordham as a night job and realized he needed to do this in order to get ahead in the business world. So because he did not go to these illustrious schools, it was so important for him that education was what we had. And similar to, I think, many families, you know, who didn't have that. And so education was the thing. It was your investment. It's what no one could take from you. And so, you know, I've grown up where investing in oneself is, we live in a very privileged world. We're all very privileged in many ways, you know, but the one thing no one takes from you that you've earned yourself, and real confidence comes from what you've managed to overcome. No one gives that to you. You know, when my son failed his black belt at 11 years old, and he went back and did it, and then he got his black belt 6 months later, or whatever it was, that confidence, I could never have been like, oh, it's okay. I couldn't have done that. He needed to know what failure is, and he needed to win and get, there's no amount of accolades I could, or kisses or hugs I could give him to build that confidence. And equally, when you get into these schools, or you work hard, or you do well, you're investing in the fabric of who you are, irrespective of whether you use it or you don't use it. We all use it, right? The way your mind thinks and you analyze could be, it doesn't matter what profession you go into or if you have no profession. So education was something, and as an Arab girl growing up in this sort of East-West dichotomy, it was very important, and I understood, and I till today, there is a huge gravitas that comes with how to think, the quality of your interaction, you know, the level of your mind, and so this was till today. And also, my dad then sat on a lot of boards when he wasn't working. He felt it was his duty to contribute, as do I, you know, so.
And you use, you use the analogy that education is like an elastic band.
Yes.
So explain that to the audience.
So I think growing up as this Arab girl where, you know, I was so global and yet I wasn't. I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, and we do this like this and you can't do that, and I can't marry this, and there were a lot of rules, you know, and so I navigated some of it. I got in trouble with a lot, you know, like, you know, colored between the lines and danced between the raindrops, as they say. But I think what I realized was, here I was told to invest education. So I was at ASL. My dad wanted me to go to St. Paul's girls' school. At the time, going from the American system to St. Paul's was just like, how do you make this jump? And the idea was, he said, well, I want you to go to Oxford. You're not going to apply to the U.S. Well, everybody wants to go to Oxford. Well, we're going to make it happen. So you need to go to this school to go there. So this was a big change. So okay, fine. Here's this girl who leaves ASL, and I go to St. Paul's, and I'm, the stupidest girl in the whole school. But I managed to stay in it, and then I managed to make my way to Oxford and do an undergraduate. And then I'm told, well, you should continue because no one takes you seriously as an undergraduate. Okay, I'll do a master's. So I apply for a master's. I get in. I do a master's. Well, PhD is really what you should be doing. Okay, I'll do a PhD. I put in a proposal thinking there's no way that I'm not a PhD candidate. What are they kidding me? Anyway, I get in. I don't know how. So I started doing my DPhil. And through this journey of this elastic band that keeps pulling, right? Because the more you invest, the more you don't take what's prescribed to you. You unpack it. You challenge it. You don't agree with it. You push it. You take it. You redo it. This is the journey of education, right? How we think, what we accept, what we don't, what we like, what we don't, who you are. As the elastic band starts to pull, you can't just be like, okay, now you have all these wonderful, degrees on the wall. Now you accept that these are the rules and please color in the box. You're kind of like, wait, what do you mean? There's no box. I'm making now the box. This is what happens when you pull and you pull and you pull. So expecting this elastic band to go back to its original form, it's physically it's impossible. So this was a challenge, a huge challenge in my personal life, etc.
And so the PhD at Oxford that you did in 2004 was about, I guess, the precursors of Arab change. Tell us about that and how it's different to the world today.
Well, to be fair, like I said, I really wasn't, I didn't embark on my journey to be this scholarly, nerdy person. It just so happened I kind of tumbled into it.
It suited you.
Well, I mean, I was like, that's not who I am. Anyway, but somehow I stayed in it and I loved it. As an undergraduate, I had done a dissertation on the role of education in the 20th century in the Arab world, female education, and why female education picked up in the 20th century, and it was men who were pushing the narrative of women. And the reason they pushed it was so that women would be better wives, rather than women becoming emancipated. It wasn't women pushing it, it was men pushing the agenda. Then I went on to do my master's in education. I did a comparative education, and I looked at Israel and Saudi Arabia, primary education, and the role that education has in formulating identity. And I just thought, okay, I don't know, I'm gonna stop. And then my supervisor said, well, you should write a PhD, and I thought, in what? Well, the only thing that I was struggling with was identity. Here I was, like I said, straddling two cultures. So my quest was to go out and interview women, 10 women. This was not a general thing. I was not trying to do a mass study. I wanted to understand how 10 women who were precursors to change in their respective fields navigated identity. How did these women who had been educated in their home country and abroad navigate patriarchy and that cross-cultural experiences they had? These were women who were married, these were women who were hijabad, these were women who were not
had
married.
Their heads covered, for those that
Sorry. These were a slew of only 10 women from different countries, from Egypt to Jordan to Saudi Arabia to Morocco. And I went and I interviewed, I didn't know any of them. I cold emailed them and went and had interviews. And through this journey, I was looking for my own identity, not my own idea. I was looking to see how do I make my own recipe for who I am whilst I reconcile all these roles and expectations through the experiences I had, through the family that I came from. There were expectations on me. I was the daughter of somebody there were expectations, and so how do I navigate this? I didn't know how to do that, and I was 22 years old, 23. So I looked to these women to understand their stories, and through their stories, I ended up writing an academic piece, which frankly should have been a publication. I didn't get around to it, but it was that reason. And today we see women are leading education. There are more women graduating than men, more women who have qualifications than guys. And I think actually now there's been so much focus on women. Women are in power, positions of power, maybe not where they need to be, but far more than when I was writing my DPhil. I think now we're having a problem with men. The gender role it's confusing, I think, for men, but that's for another conversation.
No, but actually tell us about that. I mean, as the mother of a boy.
Well,
so
we both have this, right? You bring up these. I struggled a lot because on the one hand, I was told, here I was, independent in many ways and strong, but then don't do this, you won't get married. Don't do that, you'll scare a man away. Oh, you can't drive that car. Oh, he'll never find a good husband. So I was like, what? I don't want a husband if he doesn't want me to do this or do that. So yeah, there was a lot of, I've been in and out of, it was bumpy. And one of the things that was really important to me was if I ever have the luxury or the privilege of being a mother and to a boy, then it's really important for me that I bring him up with strong cultural identity, because I think we live in a world where it's very important to belong to wherever one belongs, and to know heritage and family, and I was very privileged to have that, but also to respect women. But respect women without having to bend down either, because I felt at times where I had to bend down to make others tall, and that wasn't fair to me. Like, why did I have to crouch for you to feel tall? You feel tall in your own right. My light shouldn't go down for your light to shine. And equally, I don't want my son to bend down. I want him to be a force, to be strong, to have authority, to command respect, to walk into a room and he's there. At the same time, that's soft power. That's not hard power. And I think the days of what I term hard power, this maybe forceful, slightly more, in your face power, there's no space for that. And I've tried to incorporate the soft power so that I can bring at least one young man up in a world where he will respect and appreciate equality and women. At the same time, it doesn't need to be at his expense. And I don't know we'll see.
Yeah. And so you talked about, women and women starting to assume a lot more positions of power, maybe not enough. But you have a lot of that exposed. Yeah.
I mean, look at this room.
More to go, but you sit on a lot of boards and are involved with numerous organizations. So a trustee of Eisenhower, on the board of ISD, chairwoman of the Middle East Center at Oxford, a life fellow at St. Anthony's. You also served as a patron at the University of Arts of London. So an extraordinary footprint. Tell us a little bit about those board positions in general, overall, and what it was like to be a woman on those boards.
So as women, we are multifaceted. We are mothers, we are daughters, we are sisters, we are friends, we are many things. And I have, like all of us, I'm sure in this room, different facets and interests. And so I wanted to, I love the beautiful life, I love looking great, I'm very social, but at the same time I feel compelled to contribute where I can, or when I was given the opportunity to sit on these boards, each one serves a purpose. So UAL, University Arts of London, which at the moment I'm no longer a patron, but I was for quite a bit. I love art, I love supporting young people, I love mentoring, I like shining a light. Actually, that's the business I'm in right now. So when I was asked to be a patron, and I would go to the studio at Central St. Martin's of these young master's students, and they would do a show, and I would pick up one or two pieces, and it was wonderful. It's fertile creativity. So that, I believe, arts and supporting the arts it's incumbent on many of us, if we have the ability to do that, because that is an outlet that we all appreciate. So that was the education that I loved. Eisenhower Fellowship, I was invited to be a board of trustees. Eisenhower is all about leadership and global exchange and connecting bridges. And again, it's education, but at a more professional level. Later in life, fellows around the world get invited to the United States, where they spend 8 weeks working in similar industries, meeting the who's who of that industry, about understanding how do you foster leadership, building cross cultural bridges. And again, this is all about communication. This is all about tolerance. Again, we live in a world where we cannot live in silos. We can't afford to be myopic. And I'm a huge believer in that sort of dialogue. And so my father was a trustee. My uncle was the first fellow, first cohort of fellows in the early 50s when Dwight Eisenhower started it, when it was started. And he spent many years telling me how Eisenhower Fellowship changed his life. And so this is a network of people at very high levels, and so that was fascinating. My dearest friend, who I was at St. Paul's with, like my only friend actually, who came out of that very difficult few years of my life, is a formidable woman, Sasha, and she started something called ISD, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and it's probably one of the leading organizations today that works on counter-extremism. And at a time where we are really living through all sorts of difficulties, they create a lot of content, and so I sit on her board. And it's very knowledgeable. And to be fair, Dina, like, I don't know a lot of things about all of these things. This is not my world. But what's interesting is when I've been invited to these boards, they open my eyes to things. So it's actually very humbling to be around people who know so much more than I do. And often I sit there very quiet, thinking, I don't even know why I'm here. But I learn a lot. I meet fabulous people who otherwise I would not meet. And I think that's the journey of growth, is to really put yourself in an environment where you might slightly feel uncomfortable, but they must see something in me, and I don't know what they see, but I'm gonna go with it. And that is how I think we take these steps that we might not normally want to take, And then the Middle East Center is very close to my heart. I was 18 years old when I got to Oxford, and I met the director at the time, Eugene Rogan, Professor Rogan, who's still today the director. Fantastic scholar, prolific writer on the Arabs and history and all those things. And over the years, we grew very close. And so after I left, many years later, my father and Eugene struck up a great relationship, and he wanted to contribute. So they built the Zaha Hadid building, which is in St. Anthony's. I think it's won many accolades architecturally. So it was a beautiful building. Was, I believe, the last building she did before she passed away. And my father, organized this building. And so we have a very strong relationship. And then he put together an advisory board. And then he passed away, and it went to someone else. It's by election. So I was elected to be chair of this board. Again, I sit with scholars on the board. I sit with wonderful people who serve on the advisory board, and I learn a lot. I think it's about expanding one's horizons, staying open, and growing at any stage.
And I think everyone in this room can probably relate to you, and it's a big thing, a big part of what we do at the Kid and Her as well. It's that community and learning from others, and not necessarily always being an expert in the field that you're coming to hear from a speaker, but taking, a little bit in. So I think that resonates really well.
Humility, I think, sometimes the more, I think it comes with maturity to be like, actually, this is my limit. I don't know, but I'm going to learn. I think when we're younger, we think we know.
We're scared.
We're scared and insecure, and we put up all these armors. And I think with age, I think the beauty of age is the ability to unpeel some of those and say, I'm good, I'm okay. You can see me for who I am. I don't need to have all of these layers, And but I do say, and I would say this to a lot of probably younger audience, when I would be asked to give a speech or write something or be on, I'd be like, oh my God, this is gonna be terrible. And then someone said to me, they said, trust that they know what they're doing. So if they've asked you, step up. And in that stepping up, irrespective of what it is where the growth happens. It's those mini growths that get us to the next point. And that is where you build confidence. right? And that, I think I would say that as a mother, even to my son, you know, when, hi, I think I would say to him, he would be like, Mama, they told me that they want me to give a speech at school, or they want me to be the whatever, what do I do? I'm like, take it. And he's like, yeah, but I don't know how to do it. I'm like, you'll figure it out. And it's those moments where we get.
And I think that's a great piece of advice, you know, for everyone, regardless of whether it's children or people at work. Women often have that tendency to doubt themselves, you know, when they're getting promoted or asked to do something, you know, can I do it? Whereas it's true that a man wouldn't necessarily
question. A man just
question
says, I can do
that.
it, and you're like, no,
So-
you can't. And he's like, yeah, I can do it. And you're kind of, and you know who's going to wing it.
Yeah, yeah.
Then they grow.
Yeah, and that
Sorry.
feedback of, you know, they must know what they're doing when they're asking you to take that position is actually, you know, something really good
Have
to
faith.
keep in mind. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that they're not all like
Yeah.
clueless.
So we're gonna switch to slightly more exciting and colorful parts now and talk about fashion, because you can see everything in the room and Sarah's beautiful outfit that she's wearing. And so you've had a lifelong connection really to fashion. And at 13, you were already at the couture shows with your mom in Paris. You have numerous bespoke pieces, maybe some that you could share with us. So that was something that was very early on in your life. Maybe talk to us about, you know, your childhood experience with fashion before we move on to the tape.
So I told you I loved Barbie, and I had all of Barbie's clothes, okay? Like, that was a thing. So Barbie had, like, the most incredible collection in my house. So growing up, you know, beautiful clothes was, like, a thing. And my mother is a very beautiful woman and grew up where, you know, I grew up where aesthetics was very appreciated. I had a father and a mother who loved beauty and home and things, and my dad would be driving in the car on the way to a meeting. He'd stop the car, whoever was driving, and he would see something in the window of I don't know where in New York City, got down, went in, bought this incredible marble mantelpiece, and it was shipped to London. Next thing you know, it's being fitted in our house. So the attention to detail was something that I very much grew up with. Not my mother so much, but my dad. Like, he'd come home, there'd be a dinner party about to happen, and he'd go around and make sure. So this sort of appreciation was something that I grew up with. He had a business that was, took off in 1980. Well, he started InvestCorp 1982. 1984, they bought Tiffany's. And that was the first deal where they started to take brands that had not quite lived up to the reputation that he thought that they should live up to and revamp them. So you had, you know, I don't know, Bill Cheney was a chairman of Tiffany, became a very close friend. That's when they brought Elsa Peretti and Paloma Picasso in to do the collection back in the 80s. So I was exposed, and Breguet, Chaumet, Riva, Abel, the list goes on, Saks Fifth Avenue, and then of course Gucci. So in this journey, I met, you know, we would know the brand, we would be exposed to this, and it was beautiful. And I learned to appreciate artisanal. I learned to understand, for me, luxury was about distinction and not having 1,000 million of them. And the personalization. So in the time when Asprey was still in Bond Street, we would go in, and I would go with my dad or my parents when they had to buy a gift, and you'd see the backgammon with the leather that was all stitched, and you know, in England, or pieces of silver. There was a story. There was heritage. So I grew up understanding and appreciating heritage and luxury and artisanal sort of work. But at the same time, I liked things that were different. So I was a little quirky like that. I didn't want to be like everybody else. And if we were in Rome and we'd walk into a beautiful little store and there was something lovely, it didn't have to be a brand, but it was beautiful. And that appreciation that not everything needs to be branded, to the point where I probably took a step back and thought, well, I'm not really I don't go for the brands. Of course, I appreciate beautiful things, but I always tried to find things that were a little different or had a limited run. And that's sort of where I came into my little business.
And so tell us about your business. You founded it in 2021.
Yeah. So I founded my business, like I said, up until 2021, I wrote a book on education in the Arab world, I sat on boards, I did all really geeky stuff, but my most important job was being a mommy. And I have one child, so how can I be in education and not spend time with my kid? Like, I thought that's just inauthentic to start with. So, and I love kids and I used to teach. So for me, spending all my time with my baby was the most important thing. But by the time, he was 13, I was like, I better start doing something. I'm not married, so I don't have a husband to dote on. And I thought, well, I better get going, because this boy.
I don't dote on my husband. Just for the record.
Just FYI. So I thought, well, what do I do that I love? I love scouting. I love finding talent. I love shining a light on others. I don't need to be the brightest light in a room. I'm happy that there's brightness. I just want to be around it and tell everybody about it. And I realized that actually what I love to do was go in and unearth stories, and it was women, it was education, but how did this all culminate? And really what I realized was this was a business that maybe I can try and do. Now, I had many voices in my head growing up of what I can do, what I can't do, what I'm capable of, who am I, who are you, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you have no business background, you can't add, math is not your thing. There were a lot of voices, and I spent many decades ricocheting, trying to find who I am in this very noisy head. And it really, early 40s, I was like, I've really got to own this. Whatever I've done right or wrong, I have a beautiful child, and actually, if nothing else, I'll just be his mama, which is the most incredible blessing. But there was something niggling on me, and I thought, I've got to stop all these voices from telling me what I can't do, and I just have to grow some balls, and step up. And whatever happens, happens. And so I sort of plucked all this courage. It coincided with the death of my father also, and 2020, which was the COVID year for all of us. And I just thought, go for it. And I don't know where I got this surge of confidence, but I decided to start a business that curated all these brands that I found, and shine a light on them. And then I put 4 pillars that I thought would resonate with the meaning of what I wanted to do. It was either female founded, which was pretty much 98% of the brands that I found. They were artisanal. These were really people who had taken a craft and perfected it in a beautiful way. It was a limited run, so it was slow fashion. So you were not going to have a million of them, which means in order to get it into production, you would buy it, and then they would take an order, and you would get it within a week or 2 weeks. And it was or community led. You had a group of women in most cases working on something. It didn't have to be all of these 4, but it had to be one of these 4. And what I found is, similar to my PhD, I loved finding these women and hearing their stories. And some were 25 years old and starting out, some were divorced and needed a way to make a living. Others, kids were growing up and they wanted to carve an identity. Wherever they were in their journey, I was drawn to their stories. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is beautiful, because it fits in with what I love most, which is mentoring, hearing, leading, and being inspired. And in some cases now, with a lot of my brands, I work closely with them to do a collaboration. I give them an idea. I'll say this is exclusive to us, whether it's a design or a colorway. I started an e-com website at a time where I thought e-com was going to be the biggest thing. My business is probably not a boomer in the e-com world, but it's far more of a private shopping. So we do a lot of private shopping. We realize that women don't have the time, and everything's on WhatsApp. And I have an incredible team with me who are here today who support me. It's been very hard to find this team, let me tell you. That's probably been one of my biggest challenges, the people who work with you. And also finding the right kind of brands, really resonate. Shared values, very important. I feel at 50, choice is something that I've earned. You know, I have choice who I break bread with. I have choice who I spend my private time with. I have choice who I work with. And if a brand and I don't see eye to eye, or if I feel in any way that something's not quite right, we we say goodbye and gracefully, and we walk away. And I like that too. So I really feel that with every one of my brands is a real personal relationship and a synergy. And so this is what I do. I love it, and who knows where it goes? I don't know.
And so tell us about a few of the brands, and then everyone's going to have a chance to experience them. But
So, yeah.
maybe pick out a few of the brands and maybe some pieces.
So, yeah, I mean, I can. You want me to get up and show you? No. Yeah. Okay, fine. So, I have brands from they're all over the world. A brand in New York that uses Mongolian cashmere as scarves. Each one is so beautiful. That's one-off. I mean, they're soft like butter. So, I love that. I'm all about accessories. You know, if you want basic, I'm not basic. Like, I don't do, like, there's a million people who do that. A. B. I don't do head to toe. I also don't do that. I look at it as I'm here to embellish. You know, add a little something, add a little sugar and spice to your life, whether it's in your home or a beautiful throw, which we have over there at the end of your bed or as a gift, to little coasters that are all handmade by women in Jordan, to these beautiful 70s pouches that are done in gold plate and enamel in Italy, leather jewelry that's designed by she's the granddaughter of Ferragamo, and she's young, went to Central St. Martin, studied architecture, and uses leather to make these beautiful accessories that are affordable but very cool, and again, one-offs using upcycled products. We have a new brand that is from Afghanistan, and it employs women who are banned from being employed. They are not allowed to work, obviously, due to the Taliban situation, but the only thing they're allowed to do is embroidery. And so we have these gilets and these Mongolian cashmere little jackets, which are just beautiful. It takes 6 weeks to do one. It's all shearling inside. And these are helping these women keep a heritage of an artisanal trade that's just dying, and B, it's social entrepreneurship. So if I can contribute to that, but with all of these brands, we have a lab-grown gems from a brand that's had won many accolades in the UK for her designs. Beautiful, colorful, not obviously price points of the natural gems, but in today's world, does that really matter? Like, it's sustainable. So I have a designer in Lebanon where she does all these beautiful bags, handmade, woven, and we did these colors. Those are exclusive to us. Again, employing women. And every one is a journey. I mean, I'm not going to go to each of them, but I think apart from 2 brands, they're all women. They're colorful. Everything, you can get anything from 50 pounds all the way up. So it's really not a money thing, it's a vibe thing. And they all have a story, and it makes me happy. And I love, it brings me joy, and it's creative, and I'm so pleased when I can show what I have found with others who appreciate it. And I tell you, Dina, in a weird way, this is soft diplomacy. Because there's a lot of brands that would never have access to my world. Yeah. And it's been on many occasions, I have had people who would never have thought that their product can end up with somebody somewhere in another country who's incredibly high profile. And I don't share this with them, but I quietly think, wow, that person is wearing something from a country they would never even have access to. This is the world we live in, and I think if we can all do our part, of course it's a business at the end of the day, but there's a purpose, and that's what I love,
No, absolutely, and you're helping a lot of women along the way, so absolutely. Maybe if we take some questions, if anyone has some, before we all start browsing. Yes, Ellie.
mother's influence with you? I mean, it must have been tough for her to travel as well and travel the world with you, and you have the mother's instinct of looking after her children. So what was your mother's influence on your life and what you're doing now?
Great question. So my mother is a force. My mother is a beautiful woman who got married at 21 years old and really grew up with my father. And his success needed her. Without her, I don't think he would have achieved what he achieved. Sure, as a banker perhaps, but the global life that they led, the kind of people they entertained, he needed a co-pilot. And so I grew up with an idea that a woman's role was very much there as a co-pilot to him. But that meant she couldn't really be, you had to choose, right? You can't be perfect in all. So he needed her, and he, in no uncertain terms, was very clear. Neda, I need you on this trip. So if that meant her being away for 10 days, 2 weeks, it meant her not being with me. And it was a choice that she made, and she was very vocal about it. She said, my priority is your father. Not because I don't love my girls, but if I don't prioritize him, this family won't stay intact. And his life was very high octane. And so she tried to balance the two. It meant, getting dressed and looking good and being on form, and that's a full-time job. And at the time growing up, that was sort of her thing. But I learned a lot from my mother. She was very smart. Femininity was a big thing. Like I said, I grew up watching this woman take care of herself. She was so gracious in the hostess that she was with him. The way she was a homemaker, but she was a real co-pilot to him. And that my sister and I are very much, we've mirrored a lot of that in who we are. But what she also did was she helped me refine what I needed as a mother that I had missed. I tried to become in my own mothering with my son. And to be fair, although it wasn't easy, I'm very grateful, because I could have only honed that and been hypersensitive to the things that most people won't think are a big deal, but were a very big deal, had I not had that. So, I don't let my son sit alone. I mean, until very recently, where he really doesn't want to talk to me. But only until very recently, I put him, when he was little, I put him to bed every night. I did not accept an invitation. If you invited me to something between 6 and 9 p.m., I couldn't make it. I didn't go to one cocktail party. I didn't go to anything, because that was bath time, baby time, reading time. You wanted me after? No problem, I would show up. Now, of course, I go. I'm 17 years old. The same with dinner. I couldn't stomach him sitting alone and eating by himself. There was just guilt. He didn't care, but it was my stuff. My kid and her needed to relive that. So I would sit with him, and then I would go out. And so, I had to do this dance, because I just couldn't bear him sitting by himself and eating, especially young. I said when he was little. He had no siblings, and I'm not married. So the same on the weekends. When he was like 10, he was too old to go to bed at 8 o'clock, and he was too young to go out. He didn't have friends. Where's he going to go at 10? So that became Friday, Saturday nights. I didn't really do very much, or I would go out later on. So, it served me well at the end, but it was a journey.
As you're trying to grow your business, how do you balance having the legacy that you talked about, your father's legacy? In terms of, sometimes this is like an inspiration, but at the same time it can be like not that you're in a totally different space and so on, but this idea of expectations that you're talking about. How do you balance that?
Expectations of people, of me, you mean?
Of anything that wasn't like when
Sure.
we grow up and we have like a North Star,
Yes.
it kind of creates a bit like, can I ever be?
Yes, so well, thank God I'm a woman. So I think if I had a brother, that would have been crippling. And we always laugh, like God had a plan. there is nowhere that I go where people don't say, "Oh my God, I knew your father," or "I knew who he was," or "Oh," and it's beautiful because it's a legacy that he's left us, and I'm very privileged. Obviously, I need to make sure I live up to that in terms of honoring his name, so I try. My business, there's no competing is not something I'm even thinking of doing. I tried to carve my own identity, and I think somewhere, wherever he may be, he'll hopefully be proud of his grandson,
And of you.
and proud of me. But I feel the way I live up to that legacy is just through the principles that I try and live, and I imbue in my son. And I think really ultimately living authentically. And I think that's an exercise that I think one needs to in this world. It's like you have to keep going back and get recentering, because life pulls you left, right, and center. And to remain true to your voice and stay centered and be authentic and stay true to these principles is an exercise in itself. You know, I think it's just like it's a muscle. You need to strengthen it, whether that's faith or meditation or going for a walk or whatever, it's quiet time, or these are the things that I think we build in that are the tools to support us, or a support system, you know, that help us, that navigate us through difficulty. That is how I can try and remain true to my principles, which I believe would resonate with the legacy.
I just had a question about identity, because it was something you spoke about at the start. You know, you're of Iraqi origin, but have had this amazingly international upbringing, and obviously there's lots of different ways to look at identity. But I'd be really interested in understanding, you know, how you have tried or found preserving your Arab origins in what is a very global world.
Great. So, because my parents left in the late 60s and moved to the States and then to Bahrain and then to London, we didn't have a community, so to speak, that we had to, when you come from a country that exists, you go back, you have community, you have your aunties and your grandparents, and everybody has an opinion, and everyone, so even if you're kind of open, there's an obligation to conform. So my parents created their own recipe. They picked from this and they picked from that and they made their own thing, and in a way that was fantastic, because here you had like this dual-minded, you know, Western on the one hand, but you know, appreciating culture and heritage on the other, but not too much, but not too little. But this can be very confusing, and so I navigated it through a lot of choppy waters. My personal life was very complex, because I tried to understand, how do I be this but not be that. I think my parents also were actually very open-minded, very. My father was incredibly liberal, but they felt that they needed to do justice to their daughters by making sure that they didn't ostracize us from a world that we came from. And to do that meant they needed to impose norms or conventions, or, you know, what will people say? I mean, I had this all my life. Oh my God, what will people say? I'm like, who are these people? Where are they? They're not outside my window. And by the way, those people, do you know what their kids are doing? Like, let me just tell you, I'm not gonna get into it, but what are you talking about? So we had a lot of drama. My drama was never in my academics. I got on with a job, I did well. No, my drama was in what people thought, or what I was allowed to do, or, you know, I got divorced soon after. I was 25 when I got married for the first time. A year and a half later, I was getting divorced or separated. And, you know, my parents were still receiving thank yous from all these 1,000 people that they invited, and these amazing gifts, and it was all fabulous. And coming back to fashion, you asked me about the designers. So Alexander McQueen was on his knees doing my dress under the House of Givenchy for my first engagement, and then Lacroix did my wedding dress in those days, and it was like the train was from here to there. I mean, it was something fabulous. You'd put it in a V&A museum, obviously. Today we don't wear these things. Second marriage was Elisab, also very beautiful, very simple. First wedding was 1,000 people. Second wedding was like 120. So it just shows you by then I had evolved, you know. But it was very hard, and I remember after a year and a half, you know, my parents were like, "What do you mean you're getting divorced? Then move home so people don't talk." And I'm like, "Move home? What are you talking?" The whole thing was when you get married. I didn't travel with friends till I got married. Now, doesn't mean I didn't color outside the lines, but officially I wasn't allowed to do many things. So this is where there was an oxymoron. Like, what do you mean? I'm like this very emancipated girl who's educated to the hilt and who's sat with all these people, and yet I can't go on holiday with my friends. I couldn't have a boyfriend, technically. So it was very difficult, and I did push back, and I felt like I used my education as my liberator. Education was my way of liberating myself and showing that I was worthy, you know. And I think a lot of women globally, the reason that they have attained the level of success that they have done is to prove that you've got accolades to then allow a little bit of shackles to be taken off, the invisible ones, obviously. So that's how I navigated that. I don't know if I answered your question.
And so thanks so much for an amazing discussion and conversation, and it's great to hear how passionate you are about supporting female founders. And we started talking about it a bit when I read, but why do you think some women aren't good at supporting each other, and what's the importance of women leveling each other up and elevating each other?
Okay, great question. Obviously we are all privy to, you know, so many women's organizations and women for this and women for that. Yeah, I challenge that. I don't think women always support one another. Look, I think it's insecurity. I think we can't help it, you know. We don't want others to shine. It might take our shine away. But I think one thing we have to understand, there's enough for everybody. You know, there is enough light for everyone. Everybody can shine. There's space for me to spread my wings and yours. I believe in collaboration. You know, how many times I've been told, why don't you do your own brand? I don't want my own brand. I don't want to be that designer. They know their trade better than I do. I can't be that. I can navigate with them, but my power is in collaborating. My power is in showing the world things that no one else has managed to find or curate. I can differentiate myself. I don't need to step on someone in order to be tall. And I think women need to understand collaboration is beautiful. I mean, even in beauty, right? I mean, Ratana is one of my closest friends. She's here. I mean, I'll come to lunch with my face swollen and my face is all like, and you know, she's like, who goes out? I'm like, oh yeah, I just did this laser. I'm happy to share. Like, it doesn't take from me. It's not, no one copies the other one. Everyone's an individual. So if I do it, it doesn't mean you doing it is gonna make you look better than me or worse than me, or we can both look good. I can give you the number. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. It's not gonna take away. You know, I mean, I don't understand this mentality. I'm not taking from you.
No.
And you're not taking from me.
And sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. Now, I grew up, and this was, again, a very big theme in my PhD when I interviewed these 10 women, which I think was interesting. The men, the fathers, were pivotal and instrumental in pushing these women. My father pushed me. It was not my mother. It was, my mother was like, oh my God, Namir, she's not gonna get married. She'll be too smart. She's gonna, I mean, I heard that my entire life. I was like, oh my God, I don't want him if he's stupid, but you know, fine. My father pushed me. My father pushed my sister. But the fathers of these women, so the first Olympic Muslim woman to win the Olympic 1984 gold medalist, Moroccan, Nawal Mutawakkil, I interviewed her. She ran in Morocco in her village. She had no shoes. She was very poor. She got a scholarship to, I think, Iowa or Idaho University. Her father pushed her to go. She became the first gold medalist in the Arab Muslim world. She ran in shorts and a t-shirt. She's on the IOC committee, Olympic committee. She became Minister of Sport. There's a name day after her. She's phenomenal. Her father pushed her. So the power of the father was huge. Today, when I grew up, if I misbehaved, I'll tell your father. I'll call your father. Or, somebody in my house who worked for my parents, I'll wake up Mr. Kardar. And I'm like, okay, wake him up. Like, he doesn't even know, he'll be like, what are you calling me for? He would be in a meeting. Impossible to even get him, okay? Today, you think I tell my son, I'm gonna call your father? Like, I'm the monster. He's like, Baba, please, speak to mama, The world has changed. Today, women we are the executive decision makers in conjunction with partners or whomever. But we are the ones that go and sit and discuss the counselor with the education and the whatever. And my dad was in charge of education, finance, and future husbands. I'm the one telling my son every day, no, this is what we do and this is what you should do. And my ex-husband is full of love and talks to him about guy stuff and discussions about business and doesn't do that. So the role of women has changed, and I think women are driving that force. But women with women, I think we need to do better.
And that's what we're here for. So, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your journey from childhood to Oxford, academic boards, and then fashion. It's really all what the Kid in Her is about.
I love this Kid in Her.
And we loved having you. And now, please enjoy. I think there are people that will explain to you, what some of the brands are, and enjoy a bit of shopping. And again, Sarah, thank you so much.
For
This
having
was
me.
great.
Thank you,
everyone.
No one ate.
Now we eat.
There's all this food.